Act 3 of Extra Time this week. We're looking ahead to what's coming up this weekend, and we will start down in the Lone Star State. Texas is all kinds of messed up right now.
Don't talk about Texas that way.
Don't mess with Texas. Earlier in the week, we talked about Dallas and their problems, but their interstate rivals, the Houston Dynamo, haven't fared much better. The Dynamo now just 1 point from their first 3 games. Shep, what is going on in H-Town?
Well, we talked about the loss for Houston of Rosario. Yeah. He really never, they never replaced that. Holden, I think, has done a serviceable job, but really not an orchestrator, a creator, a schemer.
He doesn't put any fear into a defense.
Yeah, he really doesn't. Right. So they're missing that. You look at the game away against DC United, their last game, you know, the one mistake by Bobby Boswell, misjudged the ball. Right. They gave up the goal. So I think Houston will be okay. And I think against New York, they want revenge from what happened last year in the playoffs.
That's a good point. Houston is hosting the New York Red Bulls this weekend. It is a rematch of last year's playoff series. Now, is this the kind of team, when New York comes in, who's also struggling, is this a cure for the Dynamo?
Well, I don't know about a cure. I'd make the argument for both Houston and the New York Red Bulls team. This is a must-win game for both of them. I mean, they can ill afford to start this season like this. New York, with really an embarrassing loss away, up a man against Chicago last week.
How does each team get that win?
Well, I think Houston does it by making New York defend. They cannot allow, they've got to mark Juan Pablo Angel. New York has struggled in the midfield. I think that's where Houston has to pressure the ball. Okay. And then, you know, Brian Chang and Kai Kamara up top. Ricardo Clark could have a big game. They have to take this game to New York.
And New York, what do they need to do?
Well, New York has to find Juan Pablo Angel. He's been invisible, and I don't blame it all on Juan Pablo Angel. To me, he's the best striker ever to play in the league.
He's not getting the service, is he?
He's got to get the ball. Right. So Rojas has not been an effective playmaker for them. We saw the first for New York of Carlos Johnson. He's a right back, but he's an attacking right back.
He looked good.
So he needs to have a big game. They need to get the ball wide because they've not been orchestrating from the central part of the field.
Well, they certainly didn't do that this past week in Chicago when they lost to the Chicago Fire, despite being up a man for about 75 minutes. The Fire are pretty impressive because they're doing it without several key players. No Blanco. Chris Rolfe was on the bench. How good is this Chicago Fire team?
If you look at their depth, beyond the starting 11, you'd say they're the best team in Major League Soccer. They have star players, have McBride, they have Blanco, John Bush in goal, and their back line, you have Conde in the middle with Sumare, Segaris on the left. They're just wonderful all over the field. And that game against New York, to lose a man Thornton in the 15th minute, come back and win that game and survive playing a man down, that's a character builder.
Now, there's some rumors, though, of some displeasure, let's say, from Cuauhtemoc Blanco. Is that a distraction?
Well, you know, Blanco obviously is not happy, and it's not a question of, look, I'm done, I want to return to Mexico. He's throwing out a statement that maybe I'd play for another team in Major League Soccer. So Blanco's been a great player. They can't lose him in the locker room if Chicago's going to be good.
Is there any chance Blanco could even be traded?
I'd love to see it. I mean, he's been wonderful.
It would be fun,
can you imagine him in Houston?
Well, that's a good point.
With LA Galaxy?
But is there any chance Chicago's going to do that?
I don't know. Anything can happen, and Chicago is a very deep team. I'd make the argument they could do without him on the field. They've shown that.
Well, the Chicago Fire play at San Jose this weekend, and that is one of 6 interconference games going on this week. We've already mentioned Houston and New York. There's also DC at Salt Lake, Dallas at Toronto, Colorado at Columbus, and Kansas City at Seattle. Shep, by the end of this weekend, we should have a really good idea of which conference is a little bit stronger than the other one. What does your gut tell you about it?
Big weekend coming up, and
huge.
I'm picking all the home teams.
It's an easy way to go.
I really don't always do that, but just looking at the matchups, I would have to say these big games coming up, I'm going with all the home teams. So for me, the edge, or maybe parity, or maybe the pendulum has swung back to the Western Conference. I think they're doing better right now.
What is it that you see in the Western Conference teams that you don't see in the East, or whatever it is that makes them better?
I think, Greg, it's early, obviously, but I talk about them being better when it comes to the attacking third of the field, creating goal-scoring opportunities. They look like they have more chemistry, more fluidity. They're finishing their chances. Look like better teams, and I'm talking really at the top of the conference.
Chivas, Seattle, obviously, those are the teams right there, because LA and Dallas are certainly struggling. And I think I agree with you right now that the Western Conference, top to bottom, if we take out the bottom on both sides, that I think the Western Conference looks better, especially because they have those sort of core groups. I think Colorado and Chivas and Real Salt Lake have all shown that they've kept their core together this year, and that's been huge for them. And obviously Seattle, with what they've done up there, is impressive. So.
Yeah, real surprise in terms of what we've just spoken about is Houston, because they've kept their core. You know, they're not doing well. Maybe they'll turn it around. Seattle, it's been a Cinderella story.
Well, Houston, of course, seems to always struggle out of the gate, but they get it together by mid-season. Well, that's all we have for you this week on Extra Time. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, you can email us at extratime@mlsnet.com. But join us next week and we'll kick it around.